A Supreme Court justice's facade cracks as a fearless press secretary unveils a truth so shattering it could topple the nation's highest court, unleashing a constitutional storm that will change history. The Capitol Hill conference room was a furnace of tension, the air so heavy it seemed to pulse with dread. Every seat was taken, every camera fixed, every breath held as if the room itself awaited a verdict. This was no ordinary congressional hearing. It was a crucible, a stage for a clash that would shake the foundations of American democracy. At its center stood Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett, her polished judicial composure fraying at the edges. Across the mahogany table, White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt clutched a manila folder, its contents a dynamite of revelations ready to explode. What began as a routine probe into judicial communications had spiraled into a constitutional crisis, threatening the sanctity of the nation's highest court and proving that truth, when backed by ironclad evidence and fearless resolve, could hold even the mightiest accountable. The room was a pressure cooker, every whisper and shuffle deafening in the stifling silence. Barrett, flanked by Supreme Court security and her legal counsel, sat rigid, her face a mask of calm that barely hid the storm within. Her eyes, usually sharp with intellect, betrayed a flicker of unease. Leavitt, at the podium, radiated a quiet ferocity, her gaze locked on Barrett like a hunter eyeing her prey. The stakes were colossal. Leavitt's evidence, 3 years of meticulously documented communications, suggested Barrett had coordinated her judicial opinions with political operatives, a betrayal that struck at the heart of judicial independence. This wasn't just a scandal. It was a fracture in the Constitution's delicate balance of powers. The confrontation that followed would show that no one, not even a Supreme Court justice, was above accountability when evidence was airtight and courage unyielding. It was a moment to redefine trust in the judiciary, where constitutional principles would triumph over personal prestige. To understand this seismic showdown, we must first know the two women at its core and the forces that brought them to this reckoning. Amy Coney Barrett was a legal giant, her rise through academia and the judiciary marked by brilliance and staunch conservatism. Her Supreme Court appointment was a conservative triumph, hailed as a victory for originalist interpretation. Barrett's public image was one of serene authority, her rulings framed as rooted in a philosophy immune to political sway. She spoke of the Constitution with reverence, her words a shield against bias claims. Yet, beneath this sheen lay a secret, a series of private communications that would expose a stark contradiction between her public vows and hidden actions. Karoline Leavitt, in contrast, was a rising star in the executive branch, a press secretary known for her razor-sharp mind and unwavering commitment to transparency. Her role was to convey policy, but her strength was in uncovering truth and presenting it with devastating clarity. When congressional investigators handed her Barrett's communications, Leavitt saw a constitutional duty, not just a scandal. She prepared with military precision, diving into thousands of pages of emails, phone logs, and meeting records. Her mission was clear: to hold a titan of power accountable, no matter the cost. Leavitt was a warrior for truth, armed with evidence and driven by principle. This clash stemmed from a congressional oversight investigation triggered by whistleblower allegations. Claims surfaced that some federal judges were receiving guidance from political operatives on sensitive cases, threatening judicial impartiality. Initially, the probe focused on lower courts, where such breaches seemed more likely. But as investigators sifted through Freedom of Information Act records, a chilling pattern emerged. The trail led upward, implicating the Supreme Court itself, with Barrett at the center. The evidence, emails, calls, and meetings with conservative strategists spanned 3 years, aligning suspiciously with her rulings in major cases. While not necessarily illegal, it suggested coordination that eroded public trust in the court's neutrality. The constitutional stakes were immense. If a justice was aligning with political operatives, It would violate the separation of powers, the bedrock of American democracy. Any breach of this trust could unravel the nation's governance. Congressional leaders first sought private talks with Supreme Court officials, hoping to resolve the issue discreetly. But when Chief Justice John Roberts declined, citing judicial independence, Congress escalated. A public hearing was set, meant to review executive branch communications with courts. Few foresaw it becoming a constitutional battleground. Leavitt, armed with investigators' findings, turned this routine session into a crucible of accountability, her preparation transforming procedure into historic reckoning. The hearing room was a theater of gravitas, its oak walls and high ceilings amplifying the proceedings' weight. Barrett took her seat at the witness table, her presence commanding yet tinged with unease. The room buzzed, journalists scribbling, scholars leaning forward, all eyes on the justice. Barrett's opening statement was a masterclass in rhetoric, her voice steady as she championed judicial independence and the separation of powers. She spoke of her constitutional devotion, her words crafted to reassure a wary public. For a moment it seemed she might weather the storm, her reputation unscathed. Initial questioning followed a predictable beat. Republicans tossed softballs, praising Barrett's record and decrying the probe as partisan. Democrats pressed on ethics and transparency, their questions probing but general, seeking cracks without landing a blow. Barrett parried effortlessly, citing precedents and principles with scholarly ease. Her composure was ironclad, her responses polished. To onlookers, she was untouchable, a Supreme Court justice in command, a beacon of intellect and virtue. But the mood shifted when Karoline Leavitt took the podium. Unlike the congressional questioners, who skirted hypotheticals, Leavitt brought specifics. Her presence was electric, her gaze unflinching as she addressed the room with respect and resolve. She acknowledged judicial independence but stressed the executive's duty to ensure ethical conduct, even among justices. Her tone was firm, signaling she was here for war. This was a fight for the Constitution's soul, and Leavitt was armed with truth. Her first strike was devastating. Leavitt presented emails between Barrett and Leonard Leo, a conservative legal titan. Obtained via subpoena, these emails detailed discussions on pending cases, far beyond scholarly consultation. The room gasped as Leavitt read excerpts, each word a blade to Barrett's credibility. The emails hinted at deliberate alignment with political goals, a coordination unthinkable for a justice. Barrett's response was swift but defensive, her voice edged with indignation. She claimed consultations were normal, the emails misconstrued. But Leavitt was ready, unveiling more emails that built a damning case of systematic coordination. Barrett's composure wavered, her responses sharper, less certain, her eyes darting as if seeking escape. The room felt the shift. The invincible justice was cracking. Leavitt pressed on, revealing phone records of regular calls between Barrett and conservative operatives, timed suspiciously around major court decisions. The patterns screamed coordination, each call a thread in a web of impropriety. Barrett's attempts to call them coincidental fell flat, her voice tinged with desperation. The room grew silent, Leavitt's evidence a storm cloud looming. Whispers spread in the gallery, journalists typing frantically, capturing a moment that would redefine history. Leavitt's third blow was catastrophic. She presented meeting logs from conservative legal groups, documenting Barrett's attendance at strategy sessions on upcoming cases. These meetings, held during case deliberations, raised glaring ethical red flags. Barrett's claim they were educational was shattered by minutes, obtained through investigation, showing her active role in shaping case strategies. The minutes were a death knell, their detail leaving no room for denial. Barrett had not just attended, she had steered these discussions, her voice a force in a political campaign. The room was now a cauldron of emotion, all eyes on Barrett as her judicial mask crumbled. Her responses turned erratic, her objections procedural, not substantive, a desperate bid to deflect. Her earlier eloquence was gone, replaced by disarray, a stark contrast to Leavitt's relentless precision. The gallery buzzed, journalists capturing every moment, scholars stunned. This was no hearing. It was an unmasking, a reckoning for a justice who thought herself untouchable. The climax came with recorded conversations, legally obtained via congressional surveillance. These captured Barrett discussing cases with operatives, her words steeped in political strategy, contradicting her public stance on independence. The room fell silent as Leavitt played the audio, Barrett's voice, a confession, echoing through the chamber. She spoke of outcomes, not principles, revealing a chasm between her public and private selves. The recordings were a gut punch, their truth undeniable, their impact devastating. Barrett's betrayal was exposed, her words a wound to the nation's trust. Barrett's reaction was raw, her composure shattering. She erupted, voice trembling with fury, attacking the investigation's legitimacy and Leavitt's authority. Her outburst was a far cry from the poised jurist who began the hearing, her image in tatters. The room was stunned, committee members exchanging shocked looks, security personnel uneasy. Leavitt, unshaken, pressed on, her calm a foil to Barrett's unraveling. She presented financial records showing Barrett's speaking fees from groups with court interests, ties that, screamed conflict. Each revelation was a nail in Barrett's credibility, Leavitt's delivery, relentless. The decisive moment came when Leavitt produced a sealed envelope, delivered via a whistleblower program hours before. The room held its breath as she opened it, revealing internal court emails from concerned staff. These showed Barrett and her clerks crafting opinions to support political outcomes, using operative-suggested language without attribution. The most damning was an email where Barrett admitted her role in advancing conservative goals, a direct betrayal of her oath. Leavitt read it aloud, each word a hammer to Barrett's legacy, the silence afterward deafening. Barrett's face paled, her hands trembling. Her response was defiance, not explanation. She stood abruptly, chair scraping, and declared she'd not partake in a partisan attack on judicial independence. Storming out, security trailing, she left a void of chaos. Her exit was unprecedented, a justice abandoning oversight, a breach that shook the constitutional order. Chaos erupted. Committee members demanded her return, voices clashing in outrage. Security struggled, their authority dwarfed by Barrett's act. Legal observers sat frozen, witnessing a breakdown in checks and balances. Yet Leavitt stood firm, continuing her presentation, documenting each violation with unshakable resolve. Her voice was a beacon, her purpose clear, truth would prevail. Leavitt's final evidence was a death blow. Financial records showing Barrett's rulings benefited her financial backers, conflicts that violated ethics. Congressional leaders acted swiftly, passing bipartisan resolutions for investigations and possible impeachment. Leavitt's evidence was the foundation, a blueprint for accountability. The legal community condemned Barrett, her refusal to engage seen as guilt. Media coverage exploded, editorials demanding reform. Public polls showed bipartisan support for oversight, Barrett's actions shattering trust, Leavitt's courage restoring hope. The fallout was seismic. Congress held emergency sessions, passing laws for stronger judicial oversight and ethics. Impeachment proceedings began, Leavitt's evidence unassailable. Barrett's legal team floundered, her exit weakening their case. The Supreme Court faced crisis, Chief Justice Roberts announcing reforms. Public calls for term limits and transparency grew, the court's mystique broken. Leavitt became a constitutional hero, her preparation a model for oversight. Law schools taught the case, showing evidence's power. Globally, the case bolstered the rule of law. Barrett's impeachment, a historic first, proved no one was above the Constitution. Reforms strengthened checks and balances, preserving judicial independence for the ethical. This was a triumph of accountability, a reminder that truth and courage can topple giants. Let it inspire us to demand transparency and uphold ethics. Like this video if it stirred you, subscribe for more, and comment on how this case shows the need for ethical standards. Share other accountability stories you want explored. Together, we can keep our democracy strong, transparent, and just.